And in order for each group to be task specific, sometimes you have to subdivide the group. So the Hindu, for example, subdivided away from itself, the Jainism division, the Buddhist division, the Jerusalem gang was divided into the Judean division, the Christian division, the Islamic division, each one having their own task. Again, I'm moving too far ahead because here we have this group of people who understand the basic structure of alchemy, metallurgy, botany, chemistry, and genome, DNA. And they decide that it would be a great idea if only they didn't have to deal with these two groups of individuals, men and female, male and female, and could return to the day when there was just one group and so busy it can't handle everything, almost like married women who live at home are today. They have more tasks than is physically possible in a day's work. So they decide that they want to infiltrate into this women's community, find out their secrets and how they could go about by undermining their activity. In nature, there are always exceptions to the rule. And therefore, in the life of human beings, there is a small portion of the population that normally is born different. That small portion of the population began by being gay. Some of the males had the genome a little bit crossed up naturally and ended up wanting to be more like mom than like dad. And that small group of people, which is approximately 5%, if they could be brought in to assist the priests in infiltrating the women's coffee club secret meetings way, way back in a time 40,000 BC, that would be helpful. These people who were gay, some of them, most of them had an affinity for women, but not on the sexual side, therefore were not threats to the women, and could be basically considered part of the same group. If one looks at a program on TV these days, Sex in the City, its demographics suggest that its audience was basically women and gay people. And hopefully they can expand that audience by, I say hopefully, by the people who are making these programs, expand the audience by making a movie that would bring in a new audience. But there is an affinity there between the women and the gays, an affinity that reared its presence when a lot of the crusade warriors came back, having spent their time living with a group of men. They were now too old to be with the men. The fighting just wasn't in them. But because their families were wealthy people, it was easy for them to switch from the soldier warrior to the priest warrior and simply put on the dress of a priest and act accordingly. And that allowed for them to approach women, especially the widows of the soldiers who had died in the Middle East, and say, look, we understand you have a problem with all these soldiers coming back, and they are attacking the women sexually. We can provide you with a structure that would be defensive against this activity by creating what we would call a dual monastery. So all the widows could come to a place that looks something like a barbell, and the women would be on one side, and they would have functions, and we, their defenders, would be on the other side, the priests, and we would meet in the middle, and you would have some functions, and we would have some functions. But sex is not something that you would be faced with coming at you from outside. If you wanted sex, you would have to have it with other women as we have sex with other men, or you would have to leave or go outside. And that basically is how the dual monastery began following the Crusades. Of course, once the men came in and built up their empire of monasteries, many of them kicked the women out just so that they would have the monasteries on their own. And we see a lot of men-only monasteries, and certainly the Vatican espouses a men-only tradition or women-only tradition, and women are given the most menial jobs. They call them nun. It's not an accident that the letters to the French word un, which means one, is the name given to these women, because one was the definition of a hermaphrodite before she divided. She was both man and woman. And not an accident either that the United Nations is also called UN. By the way, I was born and brought up in a Roman Catholic family, and was involved directly in providing my labor and services to the church in things like the St. Vincent de Paul Society, until one day I woke up. But that's another story.